Om Magnir Murda Chakshushi Chandrasuryo Vishaha Shrotrivak Vivita Shavedaha Vairu Prana Hridaya Vishvamasha Padbayam Prativihi Sarvat Bhutan Taratmam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Verily, that one supreme deity is the indwelling presence in all beings and all things. Fire as its head, the sun and moon its two eyes. The revelation of revealed scripture is its cosmic mind. The universe is its heart. Its arms and legs, the four directions. Music is its voice, the wind is its breath, and from its feet the verdant earth has originated. Om peace, peace, peace. And there shines Brahman, in and throughout. May that Brahman protect us, may that Brahman sustain us, and may that Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, and with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Salutations to all beings, and welcome to SRV's new series of classes called Sadakhya. That is the topic this series of classes, which we figure will be about four Sunday classes, is going to center around the 6 ways or paths to knowledge in Tantra, in the Tantra discipline, in that darshana. We've just finished 15 classes on the Avatud, and in the Advaita Vedanta pathway, if it can be called that. And now we turn towards this beautiful complement called Tantricism or Tantric disciplines. And we'll be taking up a lot of the principles and tattvas, just like Sankhya has some 24 of them. And Tantra also, particularly in its Shaivite perspective, has 36 of them. And some of these have been put nicely as major tattvas in the Sadakhya system. So 6 ways of getting Brahmajnan, or highest knowledge as far as Tantra is concerned, is what we're going to be concentrating on. And this will take us through some deification of various principles rather than just maybe an outward study of them. As you have this tendency of living beings to externalize or objectify divine reality. But I was recently reading Ramana Maharshi and some of his teachings, and how he believes that God is external. Sounds kind of different for a Advaita Vedantist like him, but he says only the self is Brahman, nothing else is Brahman. So that's that path of Advaita we were just mentioning, talking about that people externalize or objectify divine reality. And then they try and go inside. So both the outside and the inside, the external and the internal, are not Brahman. Well, that falls along the line of all the teachings in Samkhya and Yoga and Vedanta. But the thing about it is the externalization, say for science, they're looking at the interior of exterior objects, right? When they look at particles, atoms, molecules, and so forth. So that's the external they're actually looking at to find the secret of existence, or what we would call consciousness. And then beings who are concentrating on heavenly things are looking upwards into space. So that's also external. So even you might say Samkhya philosophy, or some Samkhya philosophers are looking at the internal, called unmanifested prakriti, and seeing what it contains. And by looking inward, they're actually seeing things that are outward. So that uncompromising position of only the self is Brahman comes along, and that's the pathway of self-realization. And there's no doubt about that in beings like a Ramana Maharshi, for instance, who's just sitting there completely glorified in the self and ensconced and at ease into self, and then thinking about, you say God to him, you say, oh, that's an unknown entity, because you can't know God. That means you can't know the external, because we know that you can know Brahman with a pure mind. This pure mind is Brahman. But if you're giving the usual definition to the word God, sometimes called by different names in different religions, then you're really externalizing it, and then you're talking really about Maya when you talk about God. Like Swami Vivekananda is saying that even Ishvara is a concept of your mind. It might be a great concept, one of the greatest concepts, but still it will also dissolve when one reaches that formlessness of the divine self. So that non-separation is a very powerful teaching. And we're going to see today how in Tantra, they also have very powerful teachings to explain the existence of existence. That's why we're looking here at 6 pathways to realize Brahmajnan. So you can see that Tantra also has that word in its vocabulary, Brahman, and the wisdom of it being very important to Tantra. It's just that they're taking a little bit different approach than, say, Vedanta or yoga does, although you can put yoga and Tantra together and get one of these very beautiful hybrids of philosophy that works very well. So with that as sort of a preface, then we want to look at this Sadakhya. And there are 6 words that you're going to have to learn as your homework for this 4-series class. So I have to do a little bit of Sanskrit memorization here. So we'll show you the chart in a second, or you can show it at any time, because we're going to be referring to it a lot. Basically, you can see what they call Sadadva. Sadakhya actually means Kala. It means the Mahashakti. She's the main Kala. Kala here doesn't mean time. It means more like witness of time. So you're talking about Paras Trikala Dakala Pidristaha. If you want to look into the Sanskrit of some of the Upanishads, but that's the witness of the 3 phases of time, past, present, and future. So all of time and its phases, called Kala and Kalas, are high tattvas in the Shaivite tradition. They're higher than the 24 cosmic principles of Samkhya that we looked at: air, earth, fire, water, ether. So you're beginning to look at something that's very, very much more profound than elemental things and physical things, even usually higher than thoughts, because these are great principles that came from great thoughts. And the beings who have these great thoughts are really what Samkhya is Tantra is referring to here as Kala. So you have Kala is the first of Sadadva. That is the first. Sadadva means 6. So there are 6 things in Sadakhya. Kala and you can see it there, aspects of divinity they mean. And so this is going to take us straight to the essence of the beginnings of Tantra. When we look at aspects of divinity, immediately you would start thinking about the pantheon of gods and goddesses. But in Tantra, you could see that when they talk about Sadakhya, they're really speaking about a supreme being. And that's going to be the Divine Mother. So we'll look at her in a minute. And then the second thing, so Kala is your first Sanskrit word to think about, the first of the Sadadva, first of the six. And then Tattva comes next. And Tattva, you can see there, has been defined as categories. So it's not much different than Samkhya. It's categories that fall in, things that fall into certain categories. And so Kala is aspects of divinity, and Tattva is categories that come out of them. Bhuvana means regions, or you would call them worlds, realms, lokas, akashas, bardos, and you've got words in English, in Tibetan, and in Sanskrit, and other derivatives of Sanskrit like Hinduism and Hindu languages and so forth, which become very important because the next three are all about language. When you talk about Bhuvana, so, for instance, you're saying Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. Bu is that first prefix of those words that happen to refer to worlds. And so we say Bhuvar, Bhur, Bhuvar, we're talking about solid worlds, that is physical worlds, like we see around us. And then more towards the internal, which is Bhuvar, which is the heavenly worlds or celestial worlds. And then higher heavens in the case of Svar or Svaha. So regions are the third word. Bhuvana, you want to have both the English and the Sanskrit for that. So Kala, Tattva, and Bhuvana are the first three of the Sadadva. The fourth is Varna, which means letters. Probably you could also say alphabets, or you could also say languages. So how many languages there are in the world, some of them even forgotten and gone, never to be recovered again in this cycle. And some of them are heavily and widely used, like say English has become, because the English got all around the world. They were the greatest conquerors of the world, even passed up the Romans and Alexander the Great, the Greeks, and Attila the Hun in their dominance of the world. They took over a great percentage of the world. So you can go into the negative side of that, what happened in war and domination and so forth. But you could also look at the fact that English has become widespread around the world, so it's sort of a doorway to explain things that otherwise may be kind of abstruse or not understandable or comprehensible to people. So English has become very profound, say, in Swami Vivekananda's mission when he came west, because he had learned English very well in India and came west and had a very pure form of English that he used, and not heavily accented like sometimes you hear the Hindus have. So we can call Varna then you could almost go as far as saying sounds, but then you have words that come out of Varna. Varna is sometimes, by the way, called alphabet, a garland of alphabets, or garland of letters. So that would describe an alphabet very well, or a language is just accompanied by so many words. So Pada would be the next derivative of that coming out of Varna. That would be the fifth of the Sadadva. And then mantra, utterances, is trying to find one English word that would describe all of these things is difficult, of course. But basically mantra, that's a collection of words, right? And a collection of words you'll find formed of letters, Varna. So you can see how basically when you look at the Sadadva, these six can be divided into two that relate more to each other. That is, Kala's the deities or the aspects, the categories that they preside over, tattva, and the regions and worlds that come out of those are obviously very much connected to one another. And then you could take the other three as a second side to Sadakhya, the whole Sadakhya system, falling under the mother's care, divine mother's care. We'll look at that in a minute. And then you could see how alphabets and letters and words, utterances, and so forth are the other side of that. You could say one is kind of like Shiva and one is kind of like Shakti in a sense. We'll look at those two too. One is more like experience, and the other is more like existence. That's how they define Shiva and Shakti sometimes, in Tantra that is. So there's your introduction and your homework, all three, for the next 4 weeks. So you can memorize those in after class or even here during class if you have the abilities and facility and will to do so. Kala, Tattva, Bhuvana, Varna, Pada, and Mantra. That's Sadadva, or the 6 ways to reach Brahmajnan in Tantra. End of sentence, end of period, end of class. If you want to know what Sadakhya is or Sadadva is, then you look at these things, and maybe you looked at these things before individually, but you never put them together, number one. Or if you did think of them as somehow being together, you never thought of them as being pathways to God. And so that's how the deification in Tantra is built into the system. You see, Vedanta proceeds by not this, elimination. In fact, elimination is one of the 6 proofs of truth. If you want to prove the existence of Brahman, you have to eliminate everything else but Brahman, because everything else is not this, it's not that Brahman. But in Tantra, it's a little bit different. I mean, they both end up with inclusion of everything. Everything is Brahman, that's one of the great conclusions of Vedanta too. Vedanta, Siddhanta, Nirukti, that everything, time, space, living beings in the world, all that is Brahman. Living in constant recognition that all that's Brahman is called enlightenment. So it's this non-recognition of those things as pathways and just using them casually or using them for purposes of pleasure or power, which of course would be how people fall victim to separation like that. They're not looking at it as a whole system, like categories. That's why tattvas become so important. They're principles, they're categories, they're bunched together and they can't live without each other. That is, you can't really comprehend them without their connections. So that's the nature of consciousness. So in Tantra, really, put it this way, manifestation is in the nature of divine reality. And you wouldn't say that about Vedanta. In Tantra, manifestation is in the nature of existence or in the nature of divine reality. So you think this is how you're taking one divine entity, which may be formless, but then as Sri Ramakrishna said, God is also with form. So he had this comprehensive view about form and formless as being one indivisible reality. And Shiva and Shakti being like fire in its heat and water in its wetness and so forth. His famous sayings like that really convey this idea of non-separability, or the not two-ness, or the indivisible oneness or homogeneity of existence itself with a capital E. So, a brief introduction to Sadadva, the 6 ways of seeing, of learning in order to have Brahmajnan. So you have to put these 6 together, understand them that way, and pursue them. And that's what we're going to do for 6 hours. That's not today, don't worry. We won't do 6 hours today on it, but an hour and a half on the next 4 Sundays. We'll look at these 6 and we'll see how they connect, and we'll see what's inside of them. So taking the quote from the Tantra is a good start here. Let's do that. With self-purification achieved, liberation proceeds via extracting the essence of the scriptures and gaining an intellectual conviction, leading to mature spiritual discrimination. Lifeless mechanical rites and rituals do not work. Interesting that Tantra itself would be saying this, since there's so many rituals. If rubbing the body with ashes could bring liberation, then village dogs could have it. So it's a quote out of one of the Tantras. And that first sentence is, of course, very profound. First, you achieve self-purification by purifying these elements of your being, like senses and their connection with sense objects, getting free of attachment, free of undue desires or adharmic desires, and then the senses become pure. And then this is the way most people usually go about purification. Of course, the masters have a pure mind already, so everything they see, taste, touch, hear, and smell turns like gold. It's got the Midas touch in those beings. So that everything they go around just turns to consciousness because that's how they're seeing it. So if you're with one of them, then that's how you begin to see it. And this is one way of explaining attaining Brahmajnan in Tantra. Actually, that title is covered by this chart, but up there in the top it says 6 ways of attaining Brahmajnan in Tantra. Oh, there it is. Okay, it is. Now, looking at this chart, we see that after self-purification is achieved, then your liberation proceeds. That is, you're moving towards a liberated state. And you do that by extracting the essence of the scriptures and gaining an intellectual conviction, leading to matters of mature spiritual discrimination. So all of this, that's, you might say, a purification of a deeper level. Is that once the senses and objects and so forth, and the prana has become pure, like through your breathing exercises and so forth, then you're beginning to look at where these things came from, and you see your mind, like Holy Mother said, it's like the moon. It's very beautiful and luminous and has a lot to offer, but it's got dark spots on it. And so it's like Sri Ramakrishna's story that's so famous, is that you have a white paper and you're looking at it, looks very good. And you think, well, that's my mind, so my mind is fine, thank you very much. And then you hold it up to a light, and through that you see all these dark specks in the paper if you look closely. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna described the mind, maybe the ordinary mind. Probably, definitely we could go and extend it to say the collective mind has a lot of dark spots in it, like the minds of the ancestors and the minds of the conquerors that we just mentioned, that go about trying to get dominion over all kinds of bhuvanas and tattvas, right? I mean, basically they want to become like Kala. They want to become the supreme and then rule over all the categories and have all the lands. And so there's some very well-defended borders between these, though, that only Divine Mother will let beings pass through it. And you could say humans, ancestors, animals, along with plants and insects, of course, they're in that first 3 level of bhuvanas, which we usually think of as Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, or we think of it as Muladhara, Swadhisthana, and Manipura, right? The 3 lower chakras. So they've looked at these in different ways, and Tantra has been one of the darshanas that has gifted this kind of thinking to India, because they have been looking at under every rock and under every stone and behind every shadow and every place that any kind of consciousness might hide, sort of like a biologist would look for bugs or different kinds of plants and discover them in a wilderness. And that way Tantra's been looking for all these instances of consciousness that are springing up. And the advantage they've had is that it's back in the mind. They know all these things are proceeding from the mind, because unlike most beings, they still have corrupt senses, and their relationship with the objects is also corrupted because it's for pleasure and power. I mean, some things can get very corrupt, but I'm not talking about those sins and transgressions and all that right now. We're just talking about the normal relationship that people have in their awareness when they're trying to understand the world around them. And they might be going about their actions totally innocently, but they're causing a lot of karma and havoc. We got to win this war, so let's split an atom and let's, make a bomb and drop it on a country, kind of thinking. And thinking that they're in the right to do that. So this is the kind of thing that's a vicious act, and that there are subtler acts of a kind of vicious nature that people are committing all the time, which is the disrespect of principles that are common to all, and which Tantra feels should be deified and treated very sensitively. That kind of thing today probably go to some word like mindfulness, the opposite of mindlessness. And so be mindful of everything you do. Be very careful. If you go to a Zen Buddhist retreat or things like that, then you're called upon to be very reverent about every little thing you do, and even picking up your bowl and eating. So they're trying to renew in you or bring forth the remembrance, this idea that everything has to be treated with respect, and it should actually be treated with reverence, not just respect. And you'll probably begin to see that when we study Kala first of the Sadakhya, because that is that supreme presence in everything. So in fact, let's look at that quote next, because that ushers us into Tattva of and into Kala very well. So here you have Kala. Manifestation is in the name of reality. Manifestation is in the nature of reality. Kala, in its 5 main forms, presides over all cosmic principles. Those are tattvas. But these cosmic principles are pure, mixed, and impure. Shuddha, Ashuddha, and Shuddha Shuddha. So we'll have a chart on that and look at that. It simultaneously assists the unmanifest to transition into the manifest, and so acts as a guide for all seekers of self-realization. So in the nature of things, you were born in the body and you had parents and they guided you a little bit. You came to know, maybe if you were fortunate, about spiritual things, and you wanted to find God. So this is very much in Tantra like Guru principle is in Vedanta. So that's what they're talking about here, is that there's this Kala, this inside of each being that's first of all, it helps it to transition from its unmanifested state into a manifested state, and then it guides it back to unmanifested state. Now in Tantra, the thing is that the evolution, is going to end in involution, but they switch the accent on those. Basically, it's that everything is evolving so that it can evolve again. It's not the other way around, that, the evolution came out of the involution, now we have to get back to the involution. It's that everything is going through involution to evolution because involution is the main thing. That brings you back to your source. So it's all a sojourn away from reality, and then you feel, I need to get back to it. So when you get back to it, you find Kala. Kala could be your Guru, Kala could be Ishvara, Kala could be the Divine Mother. And that's built into your package. You see, so people are vexing out, when am I going to find my Guru, or when am I going to find God? But of course, it's right inside of themselves. It's already built into the whole process. That's the way Tantra looks at it. And those things that are in the way of finding it are called necessary imperfections. They're called malas. So your sins wouldn't be looked at as black marks on your soul. They'd be looked at as malas, something that when they drop off, which they're supposed to do at a certain time in your life, it opens up a pathway. It's like, again, Ramana Maharshi saying, when I was reading him this week, saying, the question was, why does God cause being to suffer? And And the answer was, suffering is the path to realization. So it sounds a lot like Buddhism, with Lord Buddha saying the first noble truth is suffering. But if you follow the Four Noble Truths deeper, you'll find out that there was a cause for suffering, and that led you to finding a pathway out of suffering. So right there is also in the Four Noble Truths the same thing really that's being said by Tantra and being said in Vedanta about suffering being a path to realization. Sometimes I mention Padre Pio and how one woman said, because he was showing signs of manifesting stigmata, and so people started thinking of him as, Christ was in him. So one woman asked him, "Can you take away my suffering? I know you can do it." And he answered her by saying, "If you knew how important your suffering was, you would not ask me to take it away." So here's a complete, face-off and turnaround again in these Indian darshanas, which is why Father of Yoga, Patanjali, wanted you to face the sufferings, not run away from them. They were there to teach you something important, and without them you wouldn't have come to God. You would have stayed back there in pleasure, which is a chain, you see. Iron chain, gold chain, but the iron chain happens to make you more aware of your predicament in Maya than the gold chain does. The gold chain, you say, "Oh, this is gold, it must be good," you see. So the iron chain becomes very preponderant as a weight, and you're going to want to strike off thy fetters, as Vivekananda was to say in one of his poems. So that's one of the important things about this quote about Kala. It simultaneously assists the unmanifest to transition into the manifest and acts as a guide for all seekers of self-realization. So what's being said is there's a power there that brought you from unmanifested formlessness into form that was guiding you to do that. You didn't just wander haphazardly into manifestation or into expression or into creation, but you are compelled to do that by your own inner nature, and it'll also guide you back. So the least amount of impediments you put in the way, the better for you. And that was also being said by Ramana Maharshi when I read him last week. Finishing this description of Kala, as possessor of Shakti at its highest level, Kala is the supreme Shakti, the prime mover. At the same time absorbed in reality, incapable of being differentiated from it, yet is partially and independently emergent of it, of its own divine will. So this is how to explain the divine will of the Supreme Shakti. So in order to look at Kala in this way, then let's look at this chart about her. And we can see that that the Tantric scriptures, like the mother scriptures, are emphasizing this same point. There we see a beautiful image of Mahamaya, or the dream power that Vishnu is seeing, resting on that bed of snakes, which is underneath him, and then the ocean behind him is called Ekarnava, and those are the etheric waters or of existence back there. And you can see Lord Brahma there coming out of a lotus, out of the navel of Vishnu. This is one of the symbolic representations of how the Trinity comes out, and then Lord Brahma comes out of the navel of Vishnu, and with the bijams, or the seed words, remember they're called over here Varna, Pada, and Mantra, right? Those seed words are also built into this divine package. And Divine Mother who's shown here as Sri Durga in Vishnu's cosmic dream, will give Brahma those bijams, and when they're pronounced, then he has the power to project bhuvanas, you see, regions, and based in, and the categories are all in held back in the Word. Like in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, if you want to go towards the Middle Eastern religions. So this brings up the Trinity, see, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So you can see the numbered paragraphs there. In the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, the quote is, they say that Brahman is the creator, but he is born of the navel lotus of Vishnu. So then Vishnu must be the ground for Lord Brahma's birth. Then number 2 down there, again, Vishnu cannot be the creator, for he sleeps on the bed of the many-headed snake, Ananta, at the time of cosmic dissolution. So the idea would be, who put Vishnu to sleep and who wakes him up if he's sleeping like everyone else at the end of a creation. And then you go to the third part, yet Ananta cannot be the primal hub of creation either. That's Ananta would be this bed of snakes, or this primeval waters underneath it. For he rests on the liquid ocean of existence called Ekarnava. So then the question would rise up, whose waters are those? How do they come into existence? Why is Vishnu fall asleep on them? And so that Brahma can come out of his navel. So the thing is taking the Trinity, and number 4 explains this better. So a liquid like Ekarnava must have a vessel. Therefore, I take refuge in the primal Mahashakti, the mother of all beings, who is the innate force in all and is thus the support of all. So that's one set of slokas in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, or Divine Mother Scripture, that takes up this powerful force called the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and all the worlds that come out of it. So you might say then, well, if we're talking about Kala, aren't we talking about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva? But this explains that actually, as the Tantras say, you're really talking about Supreme Shakti. I'll read that again. As possessor of Shakti power at its highest level, Kala is the supreme Shakti, or the prime mover, at the same time absorbed in reality, but incapable of being differentiated from it. So there's the fire and its heat, water and its wetness that Sri Ramakrishna was talking about. At the same time, it's partly and independently emergent from Brahman by its own divine will. So Brahman here would be called Paramashiva. So Paramashiva is that unmoving existence that without its Shakti, as Sri Ramakrishna said, can't even lift its finger. So sometimes he would look at Sri Sharda Devi as divine consort and say, point to her and say, without her, I can't even lift my finger. So he's very much in know of the independent, emergent power of Shakti as the divine mover, or the prime mover of everything in the worlds of name and form. Now this is where the accent in Tantra gets placed upon Kala, upon this source. And even then the Trinity would fall under the auspice of this force and undertake its motions. And if that was true of her and them, then all of the gods and goddesses that fall under the Trinity's auspice, like Indra, the god of the gods, and others, they would also be moving under the auspice of this Mahashakti, this Mahamaya, Mahashakti, the supporting force behind everything, or a nice way of saying it, the prime mover. Since we're on this chart, we can finish it up because it's a quick study, but it outlays some of these important things about Kala as the prime mover, as the divine Shakti. There you can see the Lord Mahavishnu of preservation, and then Lord Brahma coming out of his navel, the Lord of creation. And then the navel itself, the lotus there is this lotus of conception that he sits upon. That's, 1,000 petals sometimes. He has 4 faces, faces in 4 directions. I just chanted that basically. The arms and legs are his four directions. Sun, moon are his two eyes. Fire is his head. So this is the great being that projects all the bhuvanas based in the tattvas through the words. And so we're talking about this. You just say one sentence I just said holds all the Sadakhya in it. All six are there. And you don't have to mention them. You can just talk about the process in one sentence and see how it's inherent in everything. It's like all wisdom is inherent in the words, or all power is inherent in the particles of atoms and molecules. So this is how then you'd become in revelation about the nature of awareness. And everything that was, according to Vedanta, the anatman, or the non-self based in the ego, would also be explained well by that divine power that is the supporting force in everything. So yes, there's the ocean of unmanifested cosmic energy behind or underneath Vishnu. You can't see, that's Ananta. You can't see him very well. There's 1,000 snakes underneath him, 1,000-headed serpent. And then over there is Akarnava, the waters of existence that he sleeps upon. In the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, Sri Sutta says this: I fly for refuge to the Devi, who is praised by Lord Brahma while resting on the navel lotus of Vishnu, who himself is plunged in yogic sleep due to her power of Yoga Nidra. So deep sleep for Vishnu is yoga, is blissful. He's conscious of this state, but there's the one who's keeping him in that state is the divine power. So that's why he says, I fly for refuge in the Devi, who's a supporting force of all this. And certainly that would be the case that you see in the tantric tradition with Mother Kali dancing on the form of Shiva, who's laying flat, and then she's coming out of his chest, dancing on his chest, like a fragrance out of a flower, sometimes they say. So you can see how Shiva also lies supine in ecstasy with this vision of Mother Kali in his mind. And that's going to be the first of all principles. Principles, you think tattvas, the first of all aspects, called kala. That's how we can explain kala to a certain extent. We might as well do the quick explanation of these six before we go all that deeply into all of them. So let's look at tattva next. Beginning with the elements and proceeding to Shiva and Shakti, consciousness as experience is made up of worlds, bhuvanas, which are the planes of existence consisting of tattvas. So before we get to bhuvanas, we have to know what are the tattvas that make them up. So kala would come first in the order of things, and then the tattvas or principles would come next, and then the worlds would come next. And that would be in this order of what you might call evolution, for lack of a better term. All being for the purposes of returning, not the purpose of evolution is not for sporting in the worlds of name and form. The purpose of it all is to return. That is the main purpose of it. You don't go playing in the fields of the Lord in Tantra. You see what's there. You see that it's made up of tattvas. You see that it's how the words work and how the mantras explain everything in existence, and show you how all the universes that got projected by Kala are revealed by the mantra. That's how important the mantra is, and we'll get to looking at that later. So the bhuvanas are planes of existence consisting of the tattvas. In Tantra, they give us this gift of all the different tattvas at 3 levels. First of all, physical. And we know them, right? Because we've studied our Samkhya. Earth, fire, water, air, ether, odor, flavor, visibility, tangibility, audibility. Those are 2 sets of 5s. Excretion, procreation, locomotion, handling, and speaking. That's another set of 5s. And then smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, and touching, or I'm sorry, hearing. That's another set of 5s. So you're really much talking about these tattvas of Samkhya science in sets of 5s. Then that's nice to know, but then what about these tattvas on a psychic level? Because we just said that these are regions that, so these tattvas are also going to be prefigured into the regions that you're going to. So for instance, if you're trying to get your heart chakra open, then you've got to know that that consists of certain things. And if your problem is covering power, for instance, that's talked about that we looked about at the seminar last weekend, then you're probably going to want to know what everything is consisting of so that you can see through the cosmic subterfuge, as we talked about, and always be aware of that source, which is her. Always be aware of, I fly for refuge to her, Sutta says. So the next, that's of course pretty much describes the physical level of things. It even begins to suggest the prana, doesn't it? And how the ears hear, how the eyes see, how the tongue tastes has to do with the physical prana. So let's look at the psychical tattvas then. And remember that this is all falling under the main category of tattva, or categories in Tantra. Mind, thought, intellect, and ego. There's the 4-fold mind. Soul, Purushan, cosmic laws, niyati. Time in its phases, called kalas. Time itself, kala. So you can see how, again, maybe kala with a lowercase k is different than this main aspect of kala we're talking about. And then higher knowledge called vidya, and subtle matter, karyamaya, and attraction called raga. And I can show you a chart on the 36 tattvas of Shaivism where you'll see how all of these are placed and how they connect to all the bhuvanas later when we get to it. But right now we're just looking at tattvas in its 3-fold divisions. Now there are also spiritual tattvas. So this would be Sadakhya itself. That's the inner guide we talk about. And then spiritual wisdom called Bindu. Non-duality, Shuddha Vidya. So that's why we want to look at the 3 categories of knowledge, which are impure, mixed pure, and pure. We're going to be looking at those in a minute. We can show those. And then primal sound called Nada, and the supreme deity, Ishvara. These are spiritual tattvas. So you take all these together and you can see the 3-fold constituency or contents of tattva. And it explains what these categories are all about. It's a much deeper look at principles than Samkhya gave us. Samkhya started us out with the rice homework, particularly for people who are embodied in the physical worlds and were trying to think beyond the box of physics only, which still captures people, that box, and keeps them blindsided inside of it. And so now you're getting an idea of the depth and breadth of the tantric ways towards Brahmajnan. You have to know all this because this is the wisdom of Brahman, like made manifest. And its manifestation is at different levels. So if you looked at the spiritual tattvas here, then you'd have to know that there are some certain bhuvanas that are in that subdivision of tattva, like the world of Ishvara. How about Vaikuntha, or Kailash. Those are the names of the cities of Vishnu and Shiva. Or Manidvipa, the diamond jewel of essence, which is Divine Mother's own realm. So we have to know that the bhuvanas, are based in the tattvas, and the tattvas arrive on the scene first, and then the worlds are created out of them. Created, of course, we would say projected in Vedanta. But I guess the only real way of putting it in a culture and in a time where this Dharma hasn't been given to us, this ancient Adi Daiva Vidya, this eternal wisdom, is just to point out the lack of knowledge of such things. In fact, here's where pretty much we're all thinking. Our consciousness is all relegated to the physical tattvas only. Very, very little bit, sometimes psychology and philosophy ventures here. And of course, I'm talking Western therapy and all those things, and Western philosophers sometimes ventures there, but the spiritual tattvas are, well, what you say, they're more of a matter of one's faith, right? And that faith is going to have to be based upon vision. That is experience, spiritual experience, called anubhav. So this is why you do your manana first, and then you hear shravana, you hear about the teachings, and then you do your manana on it, and then you get the spiritual experience of it, is how that's all condensed in the Vedanta to form the three proofs of truth. So now you can see how these systems have played off with each other so much throughout the millennia, throughout the ages even. Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, Tantra. I mean, this is where you get this widest of all possible pictures of how everything, is put together because it's already together at the outset. She has predicated that it is. So, I mean, you can look at it forwards to the end, or you can look at it from the end backwards. And because we could have easily started with the mantras, and mantra, the Tantras say that, mantra is that which, by being contemplated, reveals the essence of the truth that the universe is full of Brahman. That's what mantra is. That's the definition of mantra in the Tantras. It should reveal to you, not, that's like, oh, I think I'll get pure, I think I'll get free. All of that is already in you. But what it reveals to you is that it reveals to you that everything that you're going through that you need to purify and get free from is Brahman. I mean, that's why I was just quoting Ramana Maharshi. I mean, if you say suffering is your problem, and some people have that problem, even great souls have that problem. Well, I got rid of suffering for myself, but I'm seeing other people suffering, therefore I have to have this compassion for everyone. But guess what? That suffering is so important to their awakening. So you have to be very careful when you say something like, we want to take the suffering away from all sentient beings. No, we don't. We want them to take it away themselves by realizing that it's not there, that they've imposed it upon themselves. So anything we can do to awaken them to the fact that it's illusory, that we can do. But they have to take it away from themselves and realize their true nature. And you're going to need a guide for that. The best guide is why I rush for refuge to the Devi, Sutta says. He's sitting there in knowledge of her, you see, and takes her as the highest guide. And the whole Sadakhya system, she is Sadakhya, basically. She is the spiritual element in it. So already, as I'm saying, you can see the profundity of the system when you've just looked at basically on the outside of two of the 6 words I'm asking you to do your homework on, Kala and Tattva. And if you look at bhuvanas, well, the thing is just getting, is it better and better? If you keep her as your guide, it's getting better and better. It's like having a good guide that takes you through a city you've never been to. You're going to see a lot more and understand a lot more if you have a local guide. Otherwise, you just wander. And you see a few things but don't know very much. So in this way, when you go to the worlds called bhuvanas, then if you keep this guide in mind, then you pretty much know locations. That's basically what we're talking about, or regions was a good word for that. These are the regions. I mean, it's not any different than we heard today that one of our in-laws is in Japan. So righteous brethren says, "Hey, bro, I'm in Japan. I won't be back for a couple of days." So he's gone to a region in this world. The soul is going to these regions all the time. It even goes there in its dream state and doesn't remember it and comes back out of them. It's going into the psychical tattvas, isn't it? And those are all, so in Vedanta you just say, well, let's make this simple and just call it Jagrat Shishupti, Jagrat Swapna and Shishupti, dreaming, deep, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Let's just call it that, and we'll put that as the three main tattvas, and then we'll go on meditating on the Lord who's in the fourth. So you can see how systems like that simplified things, and but it was all based upon these tattvas that Samkhya gave it in the earliest of all times, the gift of Lord Kapila. So now Tantra comes out and starts to delineate every little thing, and does it from the standpoint of deifying it, not being averse to it. It's not afraid of it, including suffering. And yoga was never afraid of it either, by the way. It's not in a fear of it, it's not an aversion of it, but Patanjali, the father of yoga himself, said that clinging to life or fear of death is that hell that you're trying to avoid, because it's against the truth. It's not true that there is. But we'll look at that next. Basically, here's the seven hells in this system, and the seven higher realms. That's bhuvana. Let's look at so I'm taking you through all six of these in this first class so we can get a good basic education, a good look at this. And you can go to Footfalls of the Indian Rishis and get out your chart, which is the book we put out, and study it and read the commentary on it there. And then take this series of classes, and then you'll know how Tantra looks at Brahmajnan in six different ways. So in the bhuvana, this is how it's described. 224 realms lie within 14 universes, 7 higher and 7 lower, ranging from gross to subtle. Some correspond to the 5 elements. You are here, that's where you are right now, here in the Burloka, or that bhuvana. And others to subtler worlds, like these psychical tattvas, made up of these psychical tattvas or these spiritual tattvas, subtler worlds. I'd say that in the word causal worlds too, when you talk about the Trinity. These exist beyond the physical plane, located in those spiritual vortexes called chakras. Now we know that not only Upanishads have a deep romantic relationship with the chakras, but Tantra certainly does too. Hard to say which came first, where the chakras are mentioned first. Because Tantra was never systematized. That's why you don't find it listing in the 6 darshanas, the 6 orthodox darshanas. You don't find Tantra there. You'll find Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga. But Tantra was just too vast and probably too ancient. So I would venture to say that, the experiments in consciousness, the adventure of consciousness, was all of tantric nature back in the time of the ancient Aryans, the earliest civilization. Earliest civilization defined as the first ones who were in the know of existence as being spiritual. Others may have come earlier, but they were attached to the land. They were attached to what they saw around them, to these tattvas. But India never was. It came forth from the last period, knowing that there was an earlier time period from which to come out of. That's the way it always saw time. Kala and Kalas, if you look into those tattvas, and as we will, then you'll see that that's the case. So they have a precognition of all these things in their earliest civilization, knowing that that earliest civilization is inside of kalas, phases of time that are indeterminable and without end. So if your seers came up with the idea in another age that this was the truth, and they passed it forth to you, and you got born again on an earth that had a very early civilization, you'd be born with that idea that this is all spiritual here. And this is a facade or a wool pulled over my eyes to think that the 5 elements are the only reality. That can happen to even very intellectual scientific cultures, right? And they can become so obsessed with just the external that, and of course, they're beginning to call that God, as Ramana Maharshi said, like religion calls the external God. It looks up into heaven. It's presiding religion is science right now, and it's looking into objects. Everything it's looking at is external. And it looks into the internal of the external and doesn't get anywhere by that. It's going to have to look beyond external and internal. As far as Shankara says, what's he say? Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayansan. Consciousness is an indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness. Take what's external and what's internal, bring them all together into one state, one unified state, and then meditate upon that state, pass your time contentedly, and be freed. Beautiful sloka in the Vivekachudamani of the great Advaitist Adi Shankaracharya. So this is where we're making all these connections and coming back to the different darshanas. All of this is by commentary on this look at the spiritual vortexes in Tantra called chakras. Essentially, though, all realms of existence lie within. So, say this world outside here, is in the mind. If you study this, you'll come to know that all of this goes back to the main aspect of kala. So time will also dissolve back in. It'll dissolve back into Karya Maya, the cause of everything, Maya that is, and then Maya will dissolve back into Sadashiva, and Sadashiva back into Ishvara, and Ishvara back. So it's got this many-tiered level of spiritual tattvas, see, that we're talking about here. And pure knowledge and sound are very essential. We'll look at that when we look at Varna, Pada, and Mantra, the secret of sound, or Nada Brahma, they call that. Ramana Maharshi was mentioning that in my recent study of him. He's talking about the import of Nada Brahma, or Shabda Brahman, he called it. So there they are, if you want them, in that ancient and primal and eternal way. Brahmaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, Maharloka, Svarloka, Bhuvarloka, and Burloka. Basically, that's the Trinity, Brahmaloka. The Vairagas are these great seven seers, 7 rishis, called Tapaloka. Out of these 7 seers are very high aspects of kala. And then the other realized seers are in Janaloka, and then Maharloka is the sages, Svarloka the gods, Bhuvarloka the siddhas, and Burloka the humans, is how Shaivite system describes this hierarchy of worlds. And yes, you can somewhat connect those to the 7 chakras across the board. Certainly the Muladhara chakra is where most unawakened humans are residing, and that's all they know about. And they think the physical world and the physical tattvas are the only reality, which is the first thing Vedanta attacks. The world's not real. You are the divine reality. Wake up and realize that you're the divine reality. And then you talk about 7 worlds, higher and lower. And all the nether regions, the only Indian-based religion that has taken that to task is Tibetan Buddhism. You'll find teachings like Tibetan Buddhist meditations by our old friend who visited us here in Hawaii quite a lot, Kalu Rinpoche, and gave some of us Tibetan Buddhist initiation here in the islands. And nobody knew how old he was, but he looked like he was 90 or 100 even when we saw him when we first saw him. But he wrote books on teachings of the Patalas, and I tried to mention them in other spiritual circles, and nobody said, we don't want to know about those. So anyway, it's just good to know and have a mention of them, that there are these 7, in these realms of consciousness, there are 14 universes. Words are failing us here, because it's English, but in Sanskrit, and particularly in Tantra, you'll have designations for these. But basically, we're putting it as closely and succinctly as we possibly can. So the 7 nether worlds, of course, Patala is a name that's fairly known to us in the world, and it's not necessarily associated with hell either. But the Patala's 7 lower hells are there, which are, again, remember that they lie within. All realms of existence lie within. So these hells are within you too. The heavens are within you, the hells within you. All the bhuvanas are within you, and they're made of certain categories that are explained as well as they can be, and they're presided over by the Divine Mother of the Universe, the Mahashakti. She's the consort of Lord Shiva. So she will, in her own independent way, bring them out of him, because he's gone in supine, he's gone into the highest samadhi, and will not move from that ever. So she takes his existence, and turns it into experience for all beings, and provides all of this. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna was worshiping Divine Mother of the Universe the minute he was set on earth, and took Kali as his chosen ideal. Kali, Kala, you see the similarity, I think. I wanted to use this first class to introduce Sadadva. That is how the 6 principles of Sadakhya are put forth in the tantric discipline, and how they must be looked at as not just philosophy, but pathways to Brahmajnan. That's the emphasis we want to try and accent right now, is that they aren't just things you study philosophically and say, oh, I know that now, good, I'll put that in my notes and think about it. But basically, these are the pathways to get to the highest wisdom. You can see how they could take you to the highest wisdom. And by the way, the marvelous thing about this system here is that by the time you get to the last tattva, or the last category of Sadakhya, you find out that it's just as profound as the first. And it's impossible to take mantra away from, say, Divine Mother. This is how she's done it all, through words, right? I mean, that's why we sing sometimes even to her about that. Vani Saraswati Vagdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi Vinapani Hamsavahini Vedanta Rupini Pralayamam Vani Saraswati Vagdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi. Just to give an example in music of a great sloka or two, one of 5 that I'm singing about, which you can find on YouTube, nicely recorded and filmed, about this Divine Mother, into which everything with form dissolves. the form all came out of her, the form goes back into her. It does it through her aspects, like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, as we're saying, who are very important players. And it also gets spread by the seers, right? Here, and Taparloka and Janaloka. Each one of these bhuvanas or regions comes out of her, and it has a certain, it has consciousness and form in it, but very high causal forms. And they pass on the wisdom, which down through the bhuvanas, which have already been provided for with tattvas. And then later on, the words come to us, you see, right? Basically, oh, now we've got alphabets. Now we've got letters. Now we got to make sure to realize that, as I just sang there, Vakdevi, that she's in every letter. Vani Saraswati Vakdevi. She's this goddess who's in every mantra, who's in every letter, who's in every word, who's in every sentence, who's in every mantra. She's the essence of that. So it's not getting any more far-flung or difficult to understand. As the worlds begin to concretize and get denser, she's making sure that those beings who are her devotees have ways of seeing through them. Seeing through them means seeing through their own ignorance that all of these worlds exist outside of me, because they all exist inside, right? And essentially all realms of existence lie within. So this is the law of it all. But you have to know what the end consists of, right? As you go into it, if you're coming out of it in evolution. But the whole purpose is not the evolution, it's to come back. The whole purpose is to come back. It's not to go out and play. Isn't that just like the child, goes out, plays after school, mother comes, gives her a call. Like my mother used to call us because we lived in Alaska, so she learned the Eskimo, how the Eskimos call their children. So she'd go out and belt out this Eskimo call about 6 p.m. And we were in the snow out there playing with snowballs and things and making igloos and things, trying to. And then we'd come running back when we heard that call. So that's involution. You'll go out and you'll play, but the whole purpose is just to come home afterwards. And that shouldn't be forgotten. And that's one of the best ways of dealing with suffering, is to always have this advanced knowledge. This is why it's 6 pathways to that knowledge he's giving us. And they're not saying, here, you take this one, I'll take that one. You take the high road and I'll take the low road. I'll get to Scotland before you. It's like, no, we're going to take all 6 of them with us, because that's the way they come from her. They're an integrated package, Sadakhya. And we ought to keep them all in mind. So if we're in an age and a culture where this hasn't been given to us, and we have to remember it, because we're not going to invent it anew. It's going to be remembered as what it is. And we have a teacher for that, an aspect of Kala that's going to teach us this, like the 7 rishis and so forth, the seers. They're going to teach us this as we venture out. When it's all just playing inside, isn't it? There is nothing outside, really. The external doesn't even really exist. This very room is in your mind. The camera that's filming is in your mind, and the instrument I just played is in my mind. It's all being enacted inside. And we're just mistaking that for the outside and calling the external real. So much so that now we only believe in the outside. It's sort of like what we talk about the elements. When we look at a tree, we don't think that it's made of 5 elements. We think that it's made of leaves. Or maybe we look at the bark. But basically, it's got all 5 elements in it. So we don't really see the 5 elements. We have to be taught that there are 5 elements in the universe. And Samkhya was the first one that did that. But then it told you that tree is connected to the thought in your mind, through smell. Be able to smell earth, be able to taste through water, be able to see through fire, be able to touch through air, and to be able to hear the ethers. It's a matter of hearing the truth. And so all 5 of these elements connect to your 5 of your senses. And we just said, after they're purified, then your path to liberation can begin. But without them being pure, through a reckoning of something that's beautiful as Sadadva, then it's not going to happen. They're just going to kind of stay in place. It's like, you have to tread water till the rescue plane comes, shoot up a flare. So you're just staying in one place, not going anywhere. And so you're going to have to, struggle to cause some attention to be cast upon you by her grace. So she'll see you and then remind you that all of this is within you. Save me, mother, save me, mother, save yourself. I gave you everything back at the inception. And remember it, and immediately you'll be saved. And so recognition is real big in Tantra. It's called, it has to do with revelation, tirodhana, and then with pratyabhikya, actually remembering the thing in itself. As soon as you remember it, it exists. If you've forgotten it, it doesn't exist. It's, of course it always exists, but in the press of multiplicity and duality and ignorance that you're raising in front of it, then it only exists when you remember it, and it ceases to exist when you forget it. So bring it to mind. That's what we're doing right now with this very ancient and beautiful system. I think since I wanted to just, before we go into deeper looks at all of these, we're trying to get through the whole chart in one class to give us that foundation. So let's look at what, under Varna, what it says. The garland of letters, Varna Mala, that's, like what she wears around her neck, and I was just singing about Vakdevi. The science of 51 alphabets, which is an expression of the Mahashakti, the essence of indivisible truth, which reveals the mystery of creation. We'll look at that chart maybe next week, called Srishti Rahasya. It's the secret of creation. Srishti, what gets projected and sustained. And then later, Laya gets dissolved. Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. Srishti, how all of this comes into existence through Shiva and Shakti, basically. In Tantra, that would be the ultimate Kala, or Sadakhya herself, or him and herself, would be the divine couple. So that's what's being referred to here, mystery of creation. And we're not going to complain about the word creation right now. We like to call it projection in Vedanta because it's a projection of the great mind. But we understand that creation is a pertinent word here. The mystery of creation, Srishti Rahasya, vibrates via particles of intelligence called chitmatras, and includes 3 main elements: matrikas, shabda, and artha. That is, the alphabets, the word and its letters, and the meaning in the words. Have you ever thought about that? Why do I respond to a word? It has a meaning. Who put the meaning there? Who decides what the meaning is? Because if you don't remember the true meaning of the thing, you get confused. So that has to be established, that the meaning is inherent in Shabda, and Shabda is inherent in the word, and the word comes from the Vakdevi. She's the one that keeps everything pure and everything clear. And with it, like we'll get to that in a second, when you get to mantras, that the mantra can clear up the cloudiness of the mind just like that. You have to repeat it for a while until the mind wakens up by using it. But it's put together with Kala, isn't it? I mean, when you say Om Namah Shivaya, Shiva is the Kala, and the words are the bijams, and the mantra is there as the collection of them. And you think about him, and you say the mantra, and all of a sudden ignorance starts going away. And thousands of people are using this method and are having this result. So devoid of matrika shakti, matrika is funny because it also means mother, mata. Matrika shakti, consciousness would not reveal itself. Worlds, beings, objects, even Ishvara, all evolve from matrika, from matrika, the mother of the word, basically. That's short and very brief, but it's probably enough. But you think about words and their letters and the particles of intelligence in them. That's what I've been teaching SRV for like 30 years. When I first dropped the tantric bomb on my students back in the early, some 28 years ago, when we had our first tantric teachings in a Vedanta group. There was Vivekananda's Vedanta group we were a part of. So this begins to go into that side of subjectivity. Instead of just remaining in objectivity, we're starting to go towards the subjective side of things. And when you talk about the mother and the teachings or the word and its meaning, then all of a sudden you're heading for the eternal subject. And the object becomes a reflection of that. So this relationship gets clarified. And that's what we go to next. Pada really is this word, or the series of words that we're heading toward. It says the construction and meaning of whole words springing from matrika is what is called pada. The arrangement of these words into statements and profound utterances is constitutive of mantras. So we're beginning to look at how a mantra comes to be what it is by this garland of letters that she wears, and the meaning of the power of intelligence within it as particles of intelligence, chit matras. That's why Father of Yoga called her Chitti Shakti in the Yoga Sutras. She's the mother of our thoughts, but our thoughts, become words, and our words have to remain true to the thought. And hopefully the deed does too later, thought, word, and deed. But just keeping it in the philosophical realm, then you understand the meaning of contemplating words, like Mahavakyas, great sayings, and so forth. And reading Ramana Maharshi last week, then he was talking a lot about the great Mahavakyas. In fact, he called out a few of the Christian and Jewish ones, and since they were great ones, they were great Mahavakyas he was talking about. I am that I am. That's in Psalms, 3rd chapter of the Psalms. That's one of the greatest of all Mahavakyas. And Jehovah is another great Mahavakya in the Jewish tradition. So these are sayings that bring you, in your tradition, bring you immediately to the fact, like the realization of the highest kala, and how all the tattvas, the worlds, came out of it, and through turned into regions, and then you found out later on they were from your thoughts. Your words concretized from your thoughts, and your objects came from your words. And then to explain it all, that it's all Brahman, you needed the mantras. So that's how everything stayed current, and like a river always flowing to the very ocean it met finally. When the river met the ocean, and everything evolved back into Kala again. So this is all just one, interconnected, eternal cycle of Brahmajnan. That the universe consists of nothing but Brahman. It never has consisted of anything but Brahman. It will never consist of anything but Brahman. And Tantra wants to make sure that there's a good way of explaining this. So mantra itself, then, so important, is one of the greatest techniques of all that have come all the way to the Kali Yuga here and are saving people who maybe don't have the time, or maybe even the wherewithal and intelligently to spend time studying a system like this, then mantra comes forth as that, I hate to use the expression, but as a swift way of waking oneself out of ignorance. I think when you say you can't get enlightenment quickly, that's not going to be very possible, but you can awaken from ignorance quickly with the mantra. And then if that purification that goes on at the level of the psychical tattvas then leads you on your path to liberation, and you're launched. You've got the impetus now. So under mantra here, it says the science of cosmic sound. Mantra is direct knowledge. Divine spontaneous action proceeds from it. Tattvas form the objective side of experience. Mantra forms the subjective side, as I was just saying. By practicing these two aspects, one attains spiritual ascendancy. So you want to put together these tattvas with the mantras and understand how they connect. And so this begins to inspire the mind, that spiritual ascendancy. Then, it's like ignorance had a place, let's call it the 7 nether regions, or maybe even the Burloka where humans are. Ignorance had a place, didn't it? There was a darkness there. There was always in the shade. The sunlight of Brahmajnan was never shining there. And then finally you realized that there was a higher place for your mind to go. You started using the mantra. It reminded you of her or of him. And then you saw that all the worlds in space and time, that is the bhuvanas, and the categories that they came out of were all inside of the divine couple. And then you awoke from your ignorance. All of a sudden, you had spiritual ascendancy. You took your mind and you just lifted it up. Like I saw a white dog in a sewage pit once when I was out in the woods. I couldn't get out, so I just, here boy. And it was a Samoyed dog, and it came over. So it was all covered with grime, sewage. So I picked it up by the scruff of its neck, and I just pulled it up out of there and put it on the ground. And the poor thing followed me home stinking, and I just took a hose to it. So that's what you have to do with your mind, stuck in the grime of the patalas or the Burloka only, just the physical tattvas only, and you don't know all of this that's inside of you that's in the form of Brahmajnan. You just have to pick yourself up by the scruff of your own neck and pull yourself out of that self-imposed ignorance and be free. Meditate on the system, put the internal and external together, pass your time contentedly and be free. And therefore, it'll take some effort at some level of your being. And mantra is one of those great forms of effort, utterances. And how much they're coming straight as a gift from Divine Mother to you, and how you have to use them, repeat them, in order for them to do their work. So she gave you the gift, but you have to use them. It's like Holy Mother saying, the house might have foodstuffs in it, but you have to cook. See, so much the same with the mantra. It's there, she's given it to you, and now use it, and use it for a long time in the way the Guru tells you to use it. So it's direct knowledge, and spontaneous action proceeds from it. Tattvas form the objective side, mantra the subjective. By practicing these two, one attains spiritual ascendancy. Mantra then is the special knowledge which, when contemplated, reveals the otherwise unseen truth that the universe is full of Brahman. I'm memorizing that last sentence in Sanskrit right now to add to my store of slokas. Mantra is special knowledge which, when contemplated, reveals the otherwise unseen truth that the universe is full of Brahman. So this is a quick trip through the 6 categories called Sadadva in the Sadakhya system that is held there by the Divine Mother of the Universe in the Tantric tradition, and just waiting for us to discover and penetrate, which we will continue to do in the next 3 Sundays of this series of classes. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jugadgurum Padopadme Toyeshitwa Pranamami Mahur Mahur Pranamami Mahur Mahur Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Hari Om